Hey, folks, many of you know that I have hosted a podcast for several years. We're actually wrapping up season 9 today, Strike the Match with JD Payne. And for those of you that are not subscribers, check it out where you listen to your podcasts and subscribe. It's always been a podcast that I've only posted the audio files of my conversations with my guests. However, I'm doing something new at the culmination of this season, season 9, and that is I'm bringing on a real live human being. Why do I say that? Well, because season 9 has been a conversation between two AI bots about some of my writings. And so in this interview, Dr. Don Barger, who is the Director of Innovation and AI with the International Mission Board, is having a conversation with me. And the full audio version will be posted, of course, wherever you listen to your podcast. But I have also posted the video here of our interview. So for those of you that are not old school and you like your podcasts with a video and a smiley face, this is for you. I hope you enjoy. Well, hey, folks, I am very excited to have Dr. Don Barger with us today on Strike the Match. And so who is this guy? Why is he here? Because as you know, if you've been keeping up with this special season, season 9, all of my guests have been AI Alan, AI Annie, and non-living entities. And so this is the first real live human being that we have on the
Or am
pod.
I?
Or are
Or
you?
am
That's
I?
right. That's exactly right. Are we just faking
I don't even
everyone?
know that you're real.
That's exactly right. Dr. Don Barger, he is with the International Mission Board. Been with the International Mission Board for 28 years.
And
28
I
years.
started when I was like 4 years old.
How
And
about that? He
you know,
knew Lottie Moon. No,
yeah,
not that.
oh my goodness.
Not that far back.
Wow.
He is the director of innovation in AI, and I'm going to ask him to share a little bit about what he does and what his department is involved in just a moment. But to give you a little background, I know some of you listeners know who Don is, and you have met him over the years. You're familiar with his work. But for those of you that do not, I want to give you a little brief bio on him. Don did his PhD at Mid-America Baptist Theological Seminary. He has over 20 years of experience serving in Latin America. He's been involved in many innovative initiatives throughout the world. He's been involved in global partnership development for many years as well. Specifically, his experience is in the area of orality and storying. He is an adjunct professor at William Carey University, and he is also the co-author with Grant Lovejoy of a book that just recently came out titled Unreadable, another book you probably won't read. And I think, Don, you're doing an audio version of that book, right?
I am. I actually did it last weekend.
Look at that. How about that? He's a man of many talents. I've known Don for several years. I've had him in my classes before. He's a blessing to me, and I'm really thankful for what he is doing. So, Don, I'll give you the hearty welcome to Strike the Match.
Yeah, it's great to be here. It's great to be here.
So, what do you do, man? I mean, AI and um, Director of
Innovation.
Innovation. What
You
what
know,
what does
I
that mean?
and how do you do that with a degree in accounting and MDiv and a PhD in religion? I was on a call, I've been on calls all day today with people who are really, really smart. And I'm just sitting there going, I'm not that smart. Like, I don't know. I just work with a lot of really smart people is
Well,
all.
I'm not going to live up to that standard, so don't worry about me then.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it is interesting, like the whole idea of an innovation director at a mission board. I remember one day somebody I didn't know reached out on LinkedIn and said, why would the IMB have an innovation? And what do you do with AI? And I was like, really? We are very innovative. I mean, and people just make assumptions like, well, the church. I mean, really, how innovative is the church? And I think, well, I don't know. Have you ever heard of Gutenberg or FM radio or AM radio or the telegram? Or how about the CBN preceded Ted Turner's CNN
Mhm.
by 2 years? And so I think the church is very innovative. And not to say that the church invented all of those tools, but there were Christians who were very involved in the church. And some of the very first broadcast on some of those new technologies, there were Christians who dedicated their work and they did it and they did it for the glory of God. So I I think that we should be innovative. I think we should embrace innovation. We should never get to the point where we say, well, we don't do it that way.
Mhm.
We this is how we do it, and that's the only way to do it. And we become so risk averse or so set in how we do things that we don't consider the what if we did it differently, what's the possibilities. So I've kind of always had been drawn to doing things differently and looking at how we could either reinvent something or just create something from scratch. And on the field, I will say that, you know, if you're into the missions area, it's really easy to innovate small. It's really a challenge to innovate in a big organization. I mean, you're at Stanford University. I'm sure you could innovate really something small in your area, but if you were to try to innovate something, let's just say you went to your provost and say, "Hey, I got a whole new way of doing things." I can see that going. I can't see that going very well.
Right, right.
So, and I think that that's a challenge that sometimes we face with innovation. But
Yeah, yeah. Um, Funny thing, the other day I went into ChatGPT and asked ChatGPT to talk about the history of innovation within the church as related to
yeah,
missions. And I was shocked. I mean, it confirmed many things that I already had in mind.
yeah,
But I was shocked on many of the other things that really the church has been involved in
yeah.
historically in innovating for the advancement of the gospel.
I love how I love the way you even think through how to do that. I think that what we're seeing right now in AI, and I want to talk a little bit more what we do in innovation in general, but I think what we're seeing right now in AI has been this transformation of even how we were using AI 3 months ago
Mhm.
to be very linear thinking to now being very things happening at the same time, and you can actually do reasoning and ask those type of questions that you're getting much more robust thought response. And if you've used any of the new models where it'll tell you what it's thinking and how it's coming to even answering your prompt, so you'll prompt and it'll give you like this whole big thing of the user is asking me to do this, maybe I should consider doing this, or I could, and you're seeing all that reasoning that's happening in the background. I just think it's fascinating. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
yeah,
So, maybe a good way to kind of go about some of these things is to maybe set out some definitions. Kind of what are we talking about? I don't want to assume that everyone that's listening understands exactly when we use some of these terms. So three of the big ones that I want to get out there: AI, Chat GPT, and then one that has kind of, I think, come onto the scene a little bit more recently, and my listeners have heard me mention a few times already this season on the podcast, is this notebook LM.
well, where did you hear about that?
Well, hey, I'll tell you what, there was a guy who was lecturing to one of my classes. And you listeners, you need to know this. There's this guy who was lecturing to one of my classes, and he was lecturing on innovation, lecturing on the use of this resource called Notebook LM, and he was talking about um, uh, how you can create podcasts with it. And so I went back to my room because I was actually out of town in New Orleans at the seminary there, and at Don's advice, counsel, wisdom to the class, I took one of my podcast, or excuse me, took one of my blog posts, turned it into to a PDF, and put it on there, and was just shocked, was blown away. And so I have to give Don credit for
This
turning me
whole
on
season,
the whole season.
the whole season.
Because I remember, and of course, you were very slow to respond to my email because I was shocked. Because I remember when I first heard it, I thought, I can't do anything with this. Because I was really thinking, okay, I'll turn this into a lot of podcasts. But I was shocked because it was so far out of bounds with my thinking and the theological language and missiological language that needs to be really nuanced and precise. It was not there. And so I went back to class the next day, told my students about this. And one of the students, Don, also took your advice and tried it out. And he even talked about the use of the dialogue tool. And he
Yeah.
was talking about how freaky it was and things of that nature. So the more I chewed on it, fast forward a few weeks later, I thought I'm going to try this again. And the second or third time around, it wasn't as far out. But then I thought, I have some guests on my program that are, that I don't always agree with. So why not? Let's have some electronic guests on the program. So yes, uh, big shout out to you, brother,
So
on
it
that.
is. We'll answer all those. I want to delve into every one of those questions. I
Yeah, by
do.
the way, I sent Don an email and I said, Don, this is making me nervous. This is scaring me, but this is also awesome. And he responded like 2 or 3 days later. So
Yeah, I was traveling, so but I did respond, and I don't remember what I said, but I was like, don't. I think it was like,
he
don't.
probably used AI to write his email for me.
Yeah, AI was down, so I had to wait a few. So I do want to say like what I do is not just AI. So the whole part of what I do with the International Mission Board is I get to work with a really awesome team of people. Or I'd say that our innovation space is around 4 different spheres or areas or buckets. And one of those would be if you're interested in this kind of stuff like digital engagement. We have a huge emphasis around the world where we are engaging people to talk about the world's biggest problem, which is lostness, but we engage them through social media. If you read our book, another book you probably won't read, Unreadable, what we discovered, Grant and I interviewed like tons of people all over the world. I mean, 250 real full-fledged qualitative interviews, and then just hundreds of just ad hoc. And what we realized, we kind of knew it, but we didn't realize it, is that people just don't read. And I know that somebody's listening right now. Well, I like to read. Okay, great. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about lost people in general that are out there. Most people are not readers. They can read. I'm not saying they can't read. They just don't enjoy. And what they do is they use this, and they may read text and small stuff, but they also watch a lot of videos, and
Mm.
they do a lot of that. So our digital engagement team is engaging with people using social media, and it's super innovative. I mean, we had last year over 80,000 people we conversed with in digital engagement, and we're not
Wow.
a very large team. And we build out human responders who can work with them and respond to those. And uh, we did a big thing for the Olympics last year. We had 8.8 million impressions of ads that we were running, and we had over 170,000 people interact with those ads. I mean,
Mm.
170,000 people, and several over 7,000 conversations, like chatting back and forth. And it's just so many stories that we could tell about. And, the goal of those is always get to a gospel conversation where the whole
Mm.
gospel is presented. And the goal is to get people offline, not just to stay online, but to meet up, have those conversations. So it's really awesome to see all the stuff that we're doing in digital engagement, and just blessed to work with a phenomenal team that's doing that. And then kind of counter or going alongside that is the area of like digital community. Like you and I, we know each other. We go, have breakfast. Gen Z, Gen Alpha, the idea of having a relationship online and the idea of having a relationship person to person sitting next to each other, over 60% of them don't differentiate. Like people
Mm.
they've never met in person, they feel, oh yeah, I can have just as big of a relationship. So how
Right.
do we do digital engagement? How do we create digital communities, and how do we interact with people in a digital space,
Mm.
metaverse, Discord? Um, Design thinking, innovation thinking, how do you infuse organizations with that model? So we've created like an innovation incubator where we come alongside people with crazy transformative ideas that really are going to make an impact, and we kind of help them make that happen. And then finally is AI. So that's the area that I also probably spend most of my time dabbling in, and have a great part of our team, very small but really great part of our team that does AI. So you ask questions. What is AI?
Awesome. Yeah, yeah. So how would you define that, beyond just artificial intelligence?
So there's a lot of ways to define it. I think the best way to explain it is to get computers to do things that normally humans would do. I mean, I've got a lot of other definitions, a lot
Mhm.
more technical definitions, but in the end, it's getting a computer to do something that typically a human would have or could have done. What AI is just really high level math. And I
Mhm.
don't think most people, I think people think that AI is really thinking. And what AI is really doing is just really good at predicting what comes next.
Mhm.
And the AI we've had for the last, couple of years, well, we've had AI for a lot longer. The AI that most of us have enjoyed in the generative AI sphere in the last couple of years has been kind of predicting the next word at the same time. So,
Right.
if I were to say to you, the, and you come up with the next word, and then I come up with the next word, that's what AI is doing, but it's doing it really fast and it's using really high level math to pull together things that are similar and predict what should come next. What's different and what's changed in the last few months is this whole idea of AI working and concurrently coming up with options. So it's not just one thing that's happening. This is the big thing that came out with DeepSeek a few weeks ago, was this whole idea of how AI would work even differently than it has been done in the past. And so I think we're in for a pretty cool ride over the next few weeks and months to see where some of this stuff lands. So AI getting people to do things that humans would normally do.
So, so oftentimes, is it correct to say that ChatGPT and AI are synonymous, or
No,
are those okay? So those are
not at
two
all.
different. Okay, so what's
Not at
ChatGPT?
all. So so ChatGPT is one. It's a chatbot that is owned by a for-profit company. It's the creation of a for-profit company that is a closed environment AI solution. So OpenAI, which is not open at all, it's kind of ironic. OpenAI has a chatbot called ChatGPT. And that's like in the whole world, if this whole room was AI, that would
Hmm.
be like this much of AI.
Okay.
It's what most people are playing around with it. They kind of it's like what they assume is AI, but it's
Hmm.
really a small piece of AI. And it's not like, so it's free for most people. And so just like I say with Facebook, Facebook's free, but it's not free. And ChatGPT is not free. You are the product. If you are using ChatGPT, you are helping train those
Hmm.
models.
Right.
Do not put anything in those models that you wouldn't want everybody in the world to have access to and to know. So, like, if you've got your bank statements and you're wanting to reconcile those, don't do that. Like, don't upload that to Chat GPT. So you may think, well, you're kidding me. What's the risk of this? And I mean, so it is, it's not like it's going to take and then send that your bank statement to me, but it's picking up data and it's building off of that and it's learning off of everything that you feed it. So just be careful. We don't use Chat GPT. We use a different model. And so there's Claude and Anthropic and Gemini and Llama and DeepSeek and all these other models that are
Mhm.
basically what you're saying when you talk about ChatGPT. It's one chatbot, and there's all these other chatbots that are out there as well. So currently we use Llama 3.3 is the model that we're using internally. We self-host it or we host it with our partner, and so it's a private environment so that we
Mhm.
don't have to worry about our data being leaked out. So that's our org's strategy to use that. Copilot from Microsoft, a lot of companies or a lot of schools are using that. But all these things are costly, and if you want to have it securely, it's not going to be free.
Mhm.
Um, Although you can run open source models. So you didn't ask this, but like there's closed source and open source. Closed source would be stuff that you don't really know what's happening. It's kind of a black box.
Mhm.
They just take your data and they give you a response, but you don't know what happened to your data. An open source model would be stuff that you can freely download, run it locally on your own machine, turn off the internet, and work with the chatbot just like you were connected to the internet. And they also open themselves up, depending on not fully transparency, but much more transparent than what happens with the closed models like
Mhm.
ChatGPT.
So
So
Chat, just for clarification, so ChatGPT is one among many different
many.
chatbots that
So
are out
there's like 200,000 chat or AI models on Hugging Face. Hugging Face is kind of like the Google for
there.
AI
Right.
open source models.
So to use kind of another way of thinking, if the chatbot is an automobile, ChatGPT is a Ford.
Well,
Welcome.
John Brady is
Hey,
joining us
John Brady.
on our podcast here.
John Brady, the man with the
I'm
plan.
very sorry to walk
No,
in.
no, no.
I guess.
You're always welcome,
Come
brother.
on in.
John, what this is proving is that
It's real.
it's
I'm
real.
real.
That Don is not a chatbot. He's not a robot. He's
Yeah,
not AI.
and then I just photobombed your whole
No,
deal
no, no.
to prove
This is
it
this
right.
is the world of Zoom today. I expected. I thought Don would have like a dog or maybe his kid would run in or
No,
something.
But instead, I'm his pet.
I created an avatar of John Brady and had him walk into the room just to make you think he's real.
It's a very handsome avatar, I have to
All
admit.
right, there you go. Good to see you, John. That's all right.
So if a
There
chatbot,
you go.
there you go. No, if a chatbot is an automobile, ChatGPT is a Ford,
Yeah,
but they're
totally. That's a
they're
great analogy. Yeah.
Chevy and all the others that are out there. Okay.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about this thing that is a notebook LM. It's not. I don't think it's getting as much traction as as the concept of ChatGPT and others. But so what is this notebook LM thing?
So Notebook LM is one of many other solutions that that you can use to create different things. So Notebook LM, and there's not just the Google's Notebook LM. There's open source models that are this Notebook LM. But I try to explain it like very easily would be you can take a bunch of data. So it could be a website, it could be a Word document, a PDF file. The first thing I did was I uploaded my dissertation that probably nobody read except the people who were paid to read it. And I said, can you just please make this like, so you can add all the data, you can add multiple sources, and then you can give it some, what I would say, fine tuning or instructions to say, hey, this is a really academic dissertation that was done for a audience of a professor, and now I want to make this content accessible to everybody. So just create a podcast with two people talking back and forth about the concepts, and in about 10 minutes you get an audio file that is a man and a woman talking about the content of my dissertation. I'm like, wow. That was the first thing I did because I'm thinking this is 227 pages. I don't want to read that. And so since then, I've gotten kind of creative to, like you, like let me create a podcast about this topic. And then, so there are other Notebook LMs. The other thing you can do with Notebook LM is you add all this data and then you can chat with the data and you can say, quiz me on this. So you can have all of your slides. So one of the cool things I do for so my son's in pharmacy school and he's, taking a just insane level of classes like all the time. He's got tests all the time. So I was like, hey, just send me all your PowerPoints and all the professor's slides and your notes. And then originally I was doing that with like our large language model, which our own chatbot. But then I started using like this tool or some other tools that I use, and I say, hey, create a quiz of 100 questions based upon all this data. And then that worked really well. And I could send him, 10 100 question quizzes with detailed answers. But then lately, what I've been building out is just a live quiz. So I just send him a link and he opens up on his phone and it'll give you here's the question, A, B, C, or D. He puts D, correct, and it goes to the next question. Or if you put C and the answer is D, it'll say, sorry, nice try, but the answer is D and here's why. And it's just this live quiz to help you reinforce, learn all the things that you need to learn, pulled from all those documents.
Right.
So, yeah, so Notebook LM is just one way to interact with a lot of knowledge and knowledge base.
So let me get your thoughts on what the guests that I have called this season AI Alan, AI Annie. That's just my names for them. So I gave them 4 of my blog posts that would probably take 2 maybe 3 minutes to read. One was on the decline in seminary enrollment. One was on the use of culinary skills, culinary arts to reach people with the gospel. Another one was on challenges to the apostolic imagination, and one was on ethical guidelines to church planners. And what they often did was they took that document that I had to convert into a PDF that could be read in 2 to 3 minutes, and they turned it into anywhere between like a 9 to almost a 20-minute conversation.
Yeah.
So what's going on there when that happens? When I give them that raw data, what is taking place? Because they're not human beings.
It's just doing a really good job at what should be said. So you've given
But
it some
I didn't agree with a
instructions.
lot of what they said. I did agree with a lot of it, but I disagree with.
And so when that happens, so one of the drawbacks to the Google LM model is that you just get the podcast. Like you don't get to go in there and say, "Hey, let me change this word and now re-export it." Because a lot of the stuff that I do, so like text to video, text to audio generation. So I mean, you say I taught a class, taught at William Carey, teaching something else there. So I taught a class on AI there, and none of my lectures were me. Like every single lecture was my avatar. It looked just like me. It sounded just like me.
Mhm.
And I created those, but I lectured. How I created it was I actually said everything I wanted to say, recorded it, made a transcript, dropped it in there. And then if I needed to clean something up, I was just typing and doing the text to audio, text to video.
Mhm.
But with Notebook LM, you don't get that option. Like you just put all your data in and it gives you the results, but you
Right.
don't really get to say, well, don't say that, say this.
Yeah. It starts riffing on a variety of different things.
Now you can do that with your instructions. So you can give all the data and you get this place where you can give instructions, or you can just create more data. And in that data say, hey, when you do this podcast, don't say this, don't talk about this, focus on this. And
Mhm.
you can kind of fine tune the direction that it goes, but those two people talk about whatever they're going to talk about, and you don't really have a lot of options on there. So there are other tools like 11 Labs as another. It's certainly it's not free. I mean, so Google LM is totally free.
Mhm.
You're the product again, but it's
Right.
free. But 11 Labs is paid service, and you really can do the same thing, drop it all in. It'll create the script, and you can see the script, and you can change it, and then
Mhm.
re-export the audio again, and they say what you want it to say.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of other options out there, and you also have thousands of voices to choose from on that one as well.
So what are some ways, and I did this season really just to experiment, and just to roll it out as just, here's where the technology is. Here's some of my observations of the challenges and limitations. How are you seeing this being able to be used for Kingdom Matters,
So
at
there
least at
is
this point?
I mean, there's a lot of potential. So let's say that and you're somebody who's written a lot of books and you've written a lot of content. Uh, you've created a lot of thought in the area of missions, and I also love what your philosophy is. You just write a book about something that nobody else is writing a book about, and so then you're the only thing that's in that sphere. I think
Yeah, I
that's
call it riding in the desert.
yes. And so that's great. Like, so you've created content in areas there's nothing. But what if you're in Birmingham, Alabama? What if the Hispanic group that's there in Birmingham said, wow, I really like that. Do you have anything in Spanish? I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you don't write blog posts in Spanish.
Correct.
So,
I was just asked that question this past week about one of my books.
so very quickly, you could have that content draft into Spanish or Mandarin or Farsi or whatever.
But clearly, it would not be with like Notebook LM because you couldn't edit it, right?
Yeah, you could edit.
You could edit it. So
Yeah, you don't do it. You don't wouldn't do this in Notebook LM. There's other
oh,
tools
okay,
you can
okay.
do this with. But so like the class that I taught, so
Hmm.
you're asking how we would do this. The
Right.
class that I taught on AI and innovation and missions is done, and it was done in English because students were English. But
Hmm.
what if William Carey said, "Hey, we've got this whole cohort of Spanish speakers coming in." Now, I speak Spanish, uh, but I don't have time to create all that content again.
Right.
But because I speak Spanish, I can really quickly tell if it's good content
Right.
in 2 clicks. 2 clicks, that whole video, that the whole lecture that I did
Lecture. Mhm.
is now in Spanish. And when I say it's in Spanish, it's my voice speaking Spanish.
Right.
My lips are moving to Spanish. It's not dubbed. It doesn't look like, oh, the lips are moving separately.
Right. Right.
It's totally done in Spanish.
Yeah.
And then because I speak Spanish, you always want a human in the loop. So somebody's want to check it. But how much easier it's to check a whole semester of lectures than it is to translate and re-record the videos. I mean, you're
Right.
talking months of work, whereas I can do it in an afternoon. The idea of creating content of like a voiceover for an evangelistic video. We had one. The very first thing I did when I started playing around with AI a couple of years ago in generative AI is I took a 20-minute video that we had. It was in 7 parts, about 3 minutes each, and it's a creation of Christ. Took the English, and I've done this. We did this in other languages, and it's usually about a 6-month turnaround to get this done. I did it in a couple hours. Like, I did the entire video in another language, and it sounded realistic enough that when I sent it to someone in that country, I said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" His response wasn't, "Well, that sounds robotic. That sounds like a machine." His
Right.
response was, "Who is that? I think I know who did your recording."
Right.
And I
Right.
said, "No, it's Fabio, and he's an AI mod." And he couldn't believe it. He's like, "There's no way that's AI." And so you can create new content. And I did have someone check it, and there were some few words. I wouldn't say it that way. I'd say it this way. And then I just
Mhm.
opened up the program, retyped those words, re-exported the audio. Boom! I have the whole video done.
Yeah.
You can do it. So I told you we have 80,000 people chatting with us, talking to us. The biggest challenge we have are responders. So I'll just say to your audience, if you speak something other than English and you want to become a responder, a digital responder for us, reach out to me, and I would love to put you in touch with our responder network and train you how to be a digital responder.
How
But
do they connect with you? Just while we're on that note,
dbarger, DBARGER at imb.org be the easiest.
Barger at IMB.
Dbarger at imb.org. If they do that, and even still, if we had 1,000 people doing responses, during the Olympics, we had I can't remember now, 22, 27,000. I can't remember number of people we were interacting with, or that's not right. I can't remember, but it was a lot of people. When we did that, we have a limited number of responders. We had several hundred responders, but it's still a challenge, like, to keep
Mhm.
up with that. So we can deploy an AI agent that will a chatbot that will interact with that person until someone's available. Or the other thing you can do is you can triage out the people who are just abusing you or sending you nude pictures, or spam, or
Mhm.
yelling Allah Akbar to you or something. Then those people, we don't have to bother the human responders. We can reserve them. It's like a triage nurse at the hospital that sends things to the different places. So those are a couple of just really quick ways to use it. The translation piece, doing sentiment analysis. You can go back and evaluate the conversations to say, who were the best responders? Who responded well? These people said this person became a believer. Analyze that conversation. Is it easy believism? I'll tell you a fun one. All right. A few weeks ago, my pastor preached a good sermon. I knew it was going to be Monty is always a good preacher, but I recorded his sermon during this. I just recorded the whole thing,
Mhm.
took it, dropped it into our model, and I said, evaluate this sermon based upon these criteria, blah, blah, blah. And it comes out and it says, wow, this was a great sermon, very conservative. It's in line with evangelical thought. Here's why. It had a clear gospel, clearly depending on Jesus, all these things.
Mhm.
And you can probably edit this out if you don't want me to say this, but then I took Joel Osteen's sermon from the same someday. I took it and I dropped it in the model, and the model came back and said, I cannot recommend this sermon.
Mhm.
There's very little mention of Jesus Christ. It's all self-centered, it's all works-based, and it's all about prosperity. I didn't
Mhm.
say that, and I
Yeah.
would have said that, but it just gave me this huge, long evaluation of the sermon. So there's just limitless ways to think
Mhm.
about how we can use this. It can help you work on your language learning. So you can do an evaluation. You can drop in an audio transcript of you speaking to somebody else, and it can tell you everything you said wrong. It can evaluate it. Say you're an advanced low. If you want to be advanced high or advanced mid, these are the things you need to do. So there's just lots of ways to use AI to create, like, lots of solutions. Cut down on paperwork. Um, you can write your essays for Dr. Payne's classes. Oh wait, no, you don't want to do that. Um, but
So all
for
kind.
students, they should be using AI. And, like, schools that say you can't use AI, they're just kidding themselves, right?
I hear you.
In the future,
I
you're gonna
encourage
do
my students to use it. I mean, we have
yes,
appropriate parameters. We set and
absolutely.
talk through it. And so yeah, I'm definitely not anti AI. A lot of great things about AI. Do want to ask you one other question before I let you go, Don. What are some concerns that are out there, or some things that we need to kind of be cautious about in this new frontier?
Well, that's a loaded question, because I think privacy is really a big problem. If you're using these free versions of things, you really want to be careful. The whole DeepSeek scare from a couple of weeks ago, when we're recording this a few weeks ago, um, there's some real concerns about models that are hosted by governments that are hostile governments. What are they doing with the data? What are they doing with the prompts and the data you put into it? But at the same time, let's not get carried away. Like, you can download a model, run it locally on your machine, and not even connect to the internet. So there's a lot of misunderstanding about that. And if you don't understand it, then it's probably best to not do something. I think ethically, uh, we're biased. You're biased. I'm biased. We can try to not be biased, but we are culturally biased just by our surroundings.
Mhm.
We can make every effort possible to do that, and I think we try to do that. But if you want to have fun, like, go to an AI something that creates images. Um, it could be ChatGPT, it could be Gemini, it could be Copilot, whatever. If you say create a picture of one doctor, you do it 20 times in a row, and it's going to be a white man. Even though for the last few years, there have been more female people enrolled in medical school than male.
Mhm.
If you say make a picture of a nurse, it will be a woman every single time. Make make a picture of a teacher, it will be a woman. My favorite, and so some of these things they realize, and so as soon as I say it, they'll go out and force it where it won't do that anymore.
Right.
One that's been around for a while is make a picture of a woman proposing to a man. You can run that prompt. I mean, I think the last time I did it, it took me 35 or 40 times to get it to show a woman proposing to a man.
Mm.
It was always. And you may say, well, gosh, that's the way it normally is. That's not the point. The point is there's a bias built in,
Mhm.
and it's going
Right.
to make assumptions. And so you don't want to eliminate other options that are out there. And so if there are things that have been really bad that I don't even want to say that, like, there's been some image generated that were really should not be generated. Most of the data is trained on certain ethnicities and not other ethnicities. So those people are underrepresented or when they are represented, they're represented really poorly. And
Mhm.
so there's some bias in there.
Right.
I mean, there's a propensity.
And is it fair to say that that is the case even when you're not using tech, or excuse me, photos, but just using text?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I just think all I say is just recognize that. Like, I'm not saying don't use AI because this is out there. That's the world that we live in. So realize that if there's a bias or a generality in the general public,
Mhm.
that's probably going to be reflected in these models, particularly if you're using these open models. So I have another, I'll send you to another. Go to faithbot.io, faithbot.io, something that we created over the last few months. And it's a really awesome Christian chatbot. And you can ask it questions, you can ask it theology questions, you can ask it about scripture.
I even tried to mess it up, and
What's that?
I even tried to mess it up. I tried to throw out a radical concept to it, and it caught it, and so I'm
It's
impressed with it.
always going to respond. Well, it should always respond as an evangelical Christian, and always ground itself in scripture. So it's not going to give opinions or anything. It's going to always show this is what scripture says. So it's like but you're not going to get that if you go to ChatGPT and you say, give
Right.
me an interpretation of the scripture. You may get a Christian response. You may not get a Christian response.
Yes.
If you're using it to write your sermons, then shame on you. Or if you're using it to write your papers for school, then shame on you.
Mhm.
If you're using it to help fact check your sermon, or you're looking at it, you're saying, here's my sermon, does this have a natural flow? And it comes back to, well, yeah, you might want to consider adding something like this as a transition. That's a great way. I mean, who wouldn't want a better presentation if you're a professor or a student or preacher?
Right.
But I think there will be a propensity for people to just totally, use AI, and I would say those are unethical ways. Yeah, privacy, ethics. There's a lot of areas that you just got to be careful about when it comes to AI.
You've got an event coming up at the time of this podcast. We were talking
Yeah.
about before the recording. Hey, throw it out there to our listeners. Those
Yeah,
especially
so if
in
you're
the
in
area.
Alabama and we're doing an event in Prattville, Alabama for the Alabama State Convention of the Alabama Baptist State Convention, and it's on May the 8th. Um, that's about all the details I know. I know that I've got to be in Prattville on the 8th. So there's a state convention office there. You can reach out to them and they can give you more details about that. But it's going to be on how are we using AI in the church? And I think my goal is to like help you not be afraid of AI, um, and then help you understand like there are ways to use AI very safely. And I think there's a lot of ways you can use AI that are going to save you a lot of time, save you a lot of effort. Um, and I have a lot of people say I don't use AI and never will. And I say, I guess you don't use Waze. I guess you don't use Google Maps. You don't have an iPhone. You don't have an Android. You don't use a computer. You never watch Netflix. You never watch all of those things
Yeah,
loaded with AI,
right.
loaded with AI. I mean, the reason why Netflix knows what you're supposed to watch next is it just uses AI to say, okay, here he'll
Yeah,
like this.
yeah.
Or YouTube, the reason you watch 400 cat videos back to back is that it's feeding the algorithm, is
That's
feeding
right.
the AI and say, hey, watch this. So
That's right. Well, he has not been an algorithm today, nor has he been a bot on this recording of Strike the Match. It's been great to have Dr. Don Barger with us. And so, listeners, I want to encourage you to keep an eye on this guy, keep an ear out for what he's been saying and what he will continue to do in days to come. Don's on the cutting edge of a lot of things. And I think he's really helping the church as we think about how do we leverage some of these things for the kingdom to advance the gospel, particularly among those who are the unengaged, unreached people groups throughout the world. Don, thanks so much for being with us today. Appreciate you, brother.
thanks for the invitation.